Business Health Trust, and also get to work with the Seattle Metro Chamber in producing these wonderful events. So welcome to this We Got This webinar series. This webinar series was really designed to bring experts directly to business owners and operators. And today you're going to be very glad that you attended today. We get a tour of some office space. It's going to be amazing to see kind of what that back to office looks like, some tips, and really building that out as we're all starting to think what the new normal looks like and how to approach things to support our employees. First of all, a few logistical things to get started before I turn it over to the team. So first, thank you so much to our sponsor. Our presenting sponsor is Bank of America. Their support makes this available to be recorded and also to not have to charge any sort of fee for registration. The Chamber and BHT are the event partners for this. We've worked to produce all of these events, and also our event sponsor, Reach King County, which supports small businesses across King County. If you're looking for resources for your business, please check out the Seattle Metro Chamber website, and the Reach King County is within that website there and has lots of great toolkits and other things to help you run your business. So a few of the logistics. If you need technical help, please use the chat box. If you have questions for our wonderful speakers during our tour, please use the Q&A button there. This will allow me to see all of the questions and make sure that we get to as many as we can during this time. We are using live closed captioning today for this event. You can turn the subtitles off or view the full transcript by clicking Live Transcript in your Zoom toolbar. We will record this webinar and post it on the events page of the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce later today. You'll also get a post-event email that will have a link to this, as well as other information that we might find helpful and come up during the webinar. All right, so now that we've covered those things, I'd like to invite our speaker today, or our tour guide from Work Better Lab. Kathleen, welcome. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm very excited to see the lab and all of the wonderful tips that you guys will have as we start thinking about back to work. So I will turn it over to you for our tour.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. We're to host you in our space. So the global experiment in working from home has shown that it absolutely can be a viable policy, but it really requires that organizations consider their culture, processes, technology infrastructure, and real estate strategies. It even requires us to think about things like, how do we build community in a virtual first environment? Or how do we get the best of both worlds? The comfort and convenience that some of us experienced while working from home with the productivity and cultural elements that we experience at the office. In a recent Steelcase study, including more than 52,000 respondents, every single country ranked connection to people and purpose, as well as access to technology and tools, as their #1 driver for wanting to return. On the flip side, respondents ranked isolation and technology issues as the biggest obstacle in working from home. Many, including me, say we love not having a commute, as well as this enhanced ability to focus. This research also tells us that 87% of leaders expect that they're going to allow for some flexibility around how, when, and where their employees work. But what's the right formula for you, your organization, and the teams you work on? This can be paralyzing, especially when there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So with all of that in mind, the One Workplace family of brands, including Porter and Open Square, with Steelcase and Microsoft, designed the Work Better Lab. This is a place for you to visit and imagine your return. And in our time today, you're going to learn about design, research, technology, and see how designing for safety, productivity, flexibility, and even inspiration can support this new world of work that we all find ourselves in. So with that, let's go check it out and meet Niles.
Hello, Miles Scott here to talk to you a little bit about the lab, why we did this, the living room, and the den. So the lab is actually an ex-law firm, 5,500 square feet. Every space that you see today was either an ex-conference room or a relatively large private office. The reason why we wanted to bring a physical representation of the research conducted by Stillcase over the pandemic was that we wanted to provide a space where our clients and influencers can come in, ideate with us around what is feasible, what challenges they're experiencing, and how we can partner together to help them bring their employees back safely and collaboratively. The research was conducted over the course of the pandemic. Stillcase researched in 8 different countries. They had 32,000 different conversations and surveys, reviewed 8,000 different floor plans, and really condensed on some key design principles that you'll learn more about as we tour you through the space today. Here in the living room, this is a residentially inspired space that allows for both large and small groups to interact with the room from the front of the room, as you see here. We're displaying a technology, a Katai camera, which is a 360-degree camera that really provides equity through the space as we're trying to integrate both physical and virtual participants in our meeting. We'll go into the den now because we really felt like we could not ignore the home office here in the lab. And so here we're showing, displaying some solutions that really we found to be Stillcase's top selling items through the course of the pandemic. We're integrating different types of laminates that are more residentially inspired as well. Different fabrics for task chairs. But then this is also a space that could be used as an executive office as well. So this is a very flexible space that kind of hits on both home office as well as potentially a new executive office as he returns back to the office. Here we will find Brandon located in the tent.
Good morning. Thanks, Niles. So this is what we call our hideaway, and it's really inspired from these design principles that both Kathleen and Niles have been sharing. So the design principle that inspires this space is what we call the me within we. So really thinking about that individual space, because as we all know, many of our employees are looking forward to getting back to the space to collaborate. But within that creative process, we really do need to have that space for heads down and individual work. So this was designed with our work tent. So a new collection of products that provide that privacy more visually and less of the acoustic privacy, but really a great place to pop down half hour, maybe 60 minutes to get some of that heads down work done. But again, a new collection from Stillcase, which is designed as work tents. And it actually has a really great local story. We collaborated with a former designer of REI to help us launch this collection. So as we come over here, this is our sandbox. And again, continuing with these design principles, these emerging trends that came from Stillcase's research, we've designed what we call the sandbox. And it's many different heights, many different tools. And here with me is Megan Hogue, who is intimately involved with the design process. How you doing, Megan?
Hi. So welcome to our sandbox. This is really where we think through ideas, we're able to reconfigure this space, and we're really able to make the activities fit the space and the space fit the activities. So it's super fluid, flexible, and that was kind of the inspiration when we started planning this space in particular.
So curious, since we're all working from home and the creative process is pretty complex, what was it like creating the space with the various teams?
So I think the most important thing that we had to do day one was get every party involved from the beginning, because we really took an agile approach to designing this space. So we had everyone from Steelcase to Open Square to Porter to Vantis, who helped with kind of technology and all these different things. We needed them all on the same page to understand the big why of the space.
Sure.
We also initiated agile practices. So every day we had a 15-minute stand-up so that we were pushing the process along very quickly and removing those roadblocks so that we could launch this space.
Absolutely. Speaking of the 4 design principles, which design principle is your favorite?
So, I mean, that's a tough one, but like I love the fixed to fluid because I love everything being so flexible, but I really like the concept of the me within we. So we have examples of that, like the tent and everything, but really having space where users can focus.
Yeah.
Really adjacent to teams, because we're really seeing that kind of flip of space showing up within these design principles.
So speaking of
Yeah.
me within me, and I agree that's a great design principle. Talk to us about this interesting concept.
Okay, so we knew that this was going to be a lab and we needed to kind of fail forward and fail fast. And so we wanted to test out different ways of working. So one thing that we kind of tasked our Studio B team with, who is an in-house kind of industrial design think tank within Steelcase, we wanted to think through focus spaces. So this is an example of kind of a phone booth space that people could kind of duck into, do that focus work, but it's just a different type of space that we're thinking through.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan.
Thanks, Brandon.
So as we walk over here to continue the theme of collaboration, agile work, this is what we call our studio. So again, talking about these design principles and seeing these emerging trends really show up in space, especially in this post-pandemic, this is what we call fixed to fluid. Pre-pandemic, we saw a lot of permanent spaces that didn't have a lot of mobility. But we really thought about, based on the research, how do we convert spaces to provide more choice and control to our users as we come together as in teams, but also individuals. So this collection is what we call Flex Collection, and it's intentionally designed to provide that mobility and that fluidity throughout the day. So if you're standing here, it's a height adjustable desk. But what's great about it, it allows teams to really allow the space to adapt to their work versus them adapting to the space. So it's on these unique directional casters to help you move the spaces around to adapt to the teams or individuals depending on the work or that time of day. We also have whiteboards, acoustical boundaries. It's all very mobile. Again, going from the fixed to the fluid is going to be this new emerging trend that we're seeing and hearing from our employees, our users, that they really need. We leverage the vertical plane along with these work tools. So everything is very mobile, very light, intentionally designed for the users in mind. You can see different heights. Another design principle is what we call braiding in the physical with the digital. And we talked about this a bit earlier. And today we have Frank Buchholz from Microsoft to talk us through and take us through the design of this Microsoft Surface Hub.
Hey, thanks, Brandon.
You got it.
So, hey, I'm Frank Buchholz. I work on the Surface team within Microsoft, and I'm here to talk to you about the partnership that we had with Steelcase in order to bring the Surface Hub as well as these beautiful Steelcase roam stands to life. I like to have a little play on words where we would look at the roam stand as a device that allows you to roam if you want to. Right. So the idea here is going from that fixed to flexible, where we're now able to take a device where we've actually partnered with a company called APC, which you probably likely remember as if you have UPSs or uninterruptible power supplies. And there's one built into this particular stand that comes part of this coordination between Steelcase, APC, and Microsoft. And in this case, I'm now able to take a device like this beautiful 50-inch Surface Hub and turn this into a device that turns literally any space into a collaborative workspace. This device is something that is on a battery and I can move it around freely to wherever I need to get my work done. Maybe I'm in a meeting and I want to be able to now move it into another space because I want to keep my flow. Or maybe I want to be able to bring this into a space where it's in my personal office, but I want to take it out to a stand-up area or an all hands or even a keynote and be able to tell that story. The value of a Surface Hub is the ability that we have a purpose-built operating system on it that allows you to essentially walk up and use the device. You do not need to authenticate to this device in order to use it. So the simple things that I can do is like join a meeting. And when I join a meeting off this device, it actually joins straight into a meeting. And you'll see that there's a number of other call or other people that are starting to join into this meeting as well. And so in this particular space, I'm able to have this freedom of movement. You'll also notice that it launches a digital whiteboard that I can actually walk up to and actually start to whiteboard. And I can use some pretty interesting technologies. I will actually pull out a pen that I'm using. Let me actually grab it right here, sorry. And I have the ability to either use the pen that the device comes with or a slim pen, which is my pen. So it's essentially safe with my germs on it, I'd say. And so I can walk up here and maybe type in hello. But what I want to do is actually turn this into OCR recognizable text. So I could maybe circle this content and be able to highlight it. Whoops. Let me turn on that feature and be able to bring this to life. So let me actually get rid of this. But I will actually come back and be able to show that. Now, I want to also highlight the ability that if I was to move this device off to the side, I want to show the ability where I can actually do something else that's unique with the 85-inch Surface Hub. The 85-inch, just like the 50-inch, allows me to roam, and it's on an 85-inch roam stand from Steelcase as well. But I have the ability where I can now sign into this device, and I can sign in with a passwordless authentication, meaning I want to be able to use my phone to sign in rather than typing my username and password. And I want to be able to get to all of my Office 365 content, like my Word, PowerPoint, and Excel files that are in the cloud. And so I can come in here and just type in my name. In this case, I'm just going to type in Alex, and it will go out and search the corporate directory and find Alex to be able to come and sign in. Now, what it'll do is instead of asking Alex to sign his password on the screen, it says send notification. And that's because Alex is set up as a Azure Active Directory multi-factor authenticated user. That's a mouthful you do not ever need to memorize. But what it's saying is 20 is on the screen, 20 is on my phone. I hit 20 and I put my fingerprint on the device as well in order to authenticate. And you see that it starts to authenticate onto the device. This is now pulling down my most recently used files, as well as I can use this device now to join meetings and other pieces if I'm an Office 365 subscriber. It also established what's called single sign-on, which means that I don't have to sign into every single application. It remembers my settings from my most recent login to another device that I've logged into. And so now it says it's done, and it actually pulls all that content straight down onto the device so that I'm able to now use this device until I hit end session, and then it'll wipe everything off the device so another user could walk up and use it just like I did. And you'll start to see that here is a list of my most recently used files, as well as being able to essentially join calls. I could simply walk up and hit presentation, and then it would actually allow me where I don't need to walk into a room with my devices. It'll actually pull up a presentation that I had saved in the cloud. So all this type of capability means that I can now use these devices freely where I find them rather than having to schedule or other pieces. And so I will kick it back to Brandon at this point, where we'll come back and do any Q&A that you might have about the solution. But thanks for the partnership. Thank you, Frank. Appreciate it.
Come on down the hallway. We'll walk into what we call our bungalow, but first I'd like to introduce Rachel Wilcox, who is our Director of Applied Research and Consulting, and she is going to dive deeper into the research that led to the 4 design principles in emerging trends. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Brandon. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to give you a taste of the research we've been doing over the last year at Steelcase. At Steelcase, we've always been really immersed in the idea of research, user focus, and feeding that into our designs of products, of spaces, and how we support our customers, thinking about how space can enable the best performance for your people and ultimately your organization. Since the pandemic started in March of 2020, we have doubled down on that research. We've invested in over 11 primary studies with over 52,000 participants or survey responses in that, and spanning 11 countries. And so we can see what's different by each market globally and thinking about what that means maybe for trends coming across the world, as well as thinking about what specific local needs might need to be addressed. I'm excited to give you a taste of this because we know hybrid is that topic, and we know the design principles and the spaces you're seeing here today are really important to consider, and hybrid is very difficult. And so if we can give you some flavor of what we think can feed into a hybrid strategy, we can help you find your solution, because there's really no one solution. It really depends on your organization. Hybrid, as I said, is complex. It's hard to figure out, but there definitely needs to be a balance of what your people need, what the teams need to thrive, and how people work together. That includes cross-functional teams that maybe aren't on paper all together in your HR department, but teams that work side by side that maybe have different leadership teams. And then organizations. What do you need as an organization, and what do the organizations you serve need? And so thinking through those and thinking through the tensions between maybe what users are expecting, employees are expecting, and what you need for a team to thrive and what you need for your organization to thrive is really what makes this so difficult. In our research and the taste I'll give you today, we'll touch a little bit on what users of employees are saying and what they need. That includes the work from home experience, as well as what they may need when they come back into the office. Some of this was from real life examples of clients coming back so far in this pandemic. And then also what other leaders are saying across our most recent global study that included or was completed in March and just released this week. A little bit first on those users. So early in the pandemic, we focused on 5 key personas that came out of our research, and we all can relate to them in one way or another. A few to highlight, and some of the things that you might start to be hearing from your employees or have noticed is some people thrive in these environments and others struggle. And sometimes they struggle for different situations. Sometimes they thrive because that's what they like. They like that individual space, that control, and that autonomy. A couple personas I'll highlight. There's the isolated Zoomer, and that's the person who actually really feels stuck and they need to be back out with their teams, back with their company, and finding that shared purpose. There's the overworked caretaker. So you think about a lot of the virtual learning and the experiences that parents have had, as well as caring for loved ones, elderly, people who might have higher risks during this pandemic, and the amount of focus taking on for them. And then there's individuals who love the autonomy. They thrive with the idea of being able to take their dog for a walk at 10 a.m. or be on a conference call, running an errand. And so as you think through the different individual experiences people have had, that is driving their desire to come back to the office and what they might look for, as well as their desire to stay home. And early in the pandemic, we kept hearing productivity is great, we're doing this. Part of that was based on the social capital that you had with your employees and your teams. And part of that was because we were all in this together and we were thriving with the idea it was going to be more short term. As our research continued in our most recent research around work from home and the productivity levels and the engagement levels, we're seeing a drastic difference between what the productivity levels and engagement levels look like depending on your environment that you have when you work from home. So thinking about your employee base, if they have a private office, they might be able to shut that door, limited interruptions, they have a space that's dedicated to work, they're able to turn on work and turn off work much easier than if they're in a temporary space, maybe sharing the kitchen with their spouse working from home, with kids who might be doing virtual learning or home for the summer. And so depending on the situation, the ability to truly focus, to really be engaged in the work, and to maintain that productivity is something to consider. Employees do still like the idea of being at home part of the time. Most research has indicated 2 to 3 days a week is what employees are hoping to have, that flexibility in and out of the office. But when asked and studied around what employees need when they come back to work, there are 5 key things that we're working on addressing. That includes the things you've seen in these design principles. First is safety, and we all have a different lens of safety right now, and how we prioritize feeling safe and being safe. Cleanability, bringing that janitorial staff in front of the curtain instead of behind the curtain, so we all know it's being taken care of. But that feeling safe is something key. We've been hearing a lot about the mental health or the psychological safety needs that employees have. A sense of belonging, and I say this is a key driver to what will drive employees back to the workplace, and likely what you as business leaders might be thinking about you need for your organization. Belonging gives you that trust, that inclusion, and that shared purpose, and that camaraderie, that common goal, and the fact that you're all in this together. And that's something very difficult to do virtual, and it's high on the radar of things that employees need when they come back into the office. The ability to be productive. And that's always been what we've hoped for in the workplace. And we've seen productivity, as I just shared, some of the pros and cons of environments at home. But employees express the need to be able to focus and to collaborate in the office. So supporting that variety of spaces for employees, and like you've seen so far here, is a really good way to make sure they have the access to spaces to support productivity. Comfort and control. Think of comfort as the fact that a lot of employees have had the ability to go work on the sofa, maybe go work on their patio, maybe go work in their kitchen for a while with a cup of coffee. The idea of comfort in the space, options physically to support maybe different movements throughout the day, and that emotional comfort, that chance to find that environment that's best going to support you is important. And then control. Choice and control over where and how they work throughout their space at home, as well as in their space when it comes to the office place. So these 5 needs are key, as well as addressing new user behaviors. And you've seen a lot of the design principles to support these behaviors so far, but thinking about the amount of time you're on one-on-one video. So I might be in the office for some meetings to collaborate in person, but I still have that one-dot discussion with a supplier or customer that might be virtual. I'm able to control privacy, thinking about flexible spaces as we talked about, and the fact that there's lots of different layered conversations that are happening. You might start virtually or virtual with that meeting, the next meeting might be in person, and how do you stay connected to that information? So now what leaders are saying. So leaders are saying 96% of leaders believe they'll have a big shift in their workplace strategy in the near term. I think you all are experiencing that. Every customer we're working with is experiencing that. 13% have increased their desire to have a satellite office. So thinking differently, not only about their strategy, but where their space might be. And an interesting fact is that over 70% of leaders believe they'll give their employees choice of when they come in. Some will allow their employees to choose each day if they want to come in or not. And some will ask them to choose a more consistent schedule. Like, I want to come in Tuesdays and Wednesdays and be remote Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. That adds some complexity to the hybrid, and it's something that's leading to this big, wide range of what hybrid means. So I think we all talk about 3 categories. We talk about in-office, we talk about remote workers, and then this hybrid in between. But hybrid in between is a huge spectrum, and that's what's leading leaders to say they need to experiment. They need to be ready to pilot, to get participation from their employees, and pivot. They don't have the answers, and if they're open and experimental with their ideas or their beliefs and their spaces, they'll be able to test and learn and adjust. So over 94% have said they will have some pilots, some small, some large, to figure out how to best support their employees with their work environment, with hybrid work, and understand the new patterns and behaviors that they have. Big focus from the leaders will be around these 4 areas: tech upgrades and enclaves, high performance ancillary spaces, collaboration spaces in general, and then also how do you support those hybrid collaboration moments. So as we see pilots and experiments happening, these are some key areas with almost no regrets that leaders are focused on increasing the experience and the support around. Some of the factors to consider are your organization, the jobs you require to be in or be out, your change management strategy, and how you're going to prepare people to work differently, how you can train leaders and upskill managers to think differently about how they lead their people. So it is a complex strategy that includes not just one aspect of your organization, but also talent development, change management, thinking about unique situations that you manage to. So you've heard about some of these design principles. You've heard a little bit about the space being compelling. I'd encourage you to explore these 2 environments that are pretty key to making your space very compelling from what the users are experiencing and the pilots are showing from different business leaders: social hubs and hybrid collaboration. We are continuing to research. We're researching how people are coming back. We're piloting and experimenting on ourselves and with customers. We're seeing things in healthcare and in education that are evolving. And we know that the learning environment is really different. And so I would love for you to now see Kathleen and some of the things we're seeing in those spaces.
Hi, welcome to one of the most fun spaces at the Work Lab. This is the Nook. As Niles mentioned earlier, most of everything that you've seen was a private office and a legal private office, so pretty large. It's been fun to rethink what spaces like this can become and how they can support families. Supporting working parents has been something that organizations have wrestled with for a long time. And COVID definitely put a lot of pressure to get it right. So whether you've got a kid who needs to come with you for a few hours during the day, or perhaps they need to school from here all day long, we really are enjoying having this type of facility available to folks who need to bring their families into the office, or even for us if we want a fun place to work. So let's check out a fun grown-up spot, the garage.
Hello, welcome to the garage. This is a fluid space that we've all come to become comfortable with at home, right? A space in our home where we can pretty much do any and everything, right? So we want to bring that to the office as we bring employees back in. So this space is a fluid, functional space. Everything here is flexible, can nest, stack, and be put away. And also a place where we can come and do some yoga and provide some respite to our employees as well. We provided curtains so that we can put the work away as we do so, but then also provide flexibility, say, for learning and development with our technology solutions as well as our analog solutions. Yes. Namaste. So now we will go over to Brandon.
Speaking of respite, we've intentionally designed a space to provide respite. We're calling this a personal care space, but really thinking about the employee's experience as they come back to the office. There's going to be new stresses. How can we develop space very purposefully to think about respite, rejuvenation, as well as having a mother's room if a new mother needs to take care of her business. So really thinking about rejuvenation, respite, and providing these calming spaces to take care of our personal well-being. And now we'll transition over into the Q&A. Come on into the Oasis.
All right, I think we can hear you now. Great. Well, thank you for that tour. That was so cool. I think my favorite might be that last little personal care area that you showed. It kind of looks like I can cuddle up and take a nap. Of course, shouldn't do that at work necessarily, but it looks very comfortable. I love it. I would invite anybody listening and watching today to go ahead and use the Q&A box for any questions that you might have, and I'll get us started. First, can the three of you introduce yourselves and kind of what your role is, and maybe what your favorite space is that we just saw?
I'll go first. I'm Rachel Wilcox. I'm the Director of Applied Research and Consulting at Steelcase. So we work with customers as well as our research to think about what's happening in the world of work. My favorite space is probably that little private space that you saw Megan show. That's a prototype. It's the colors, the feel, the little kind of intimacy in that space is great for focus or quick phone calls.
Right.
My name is Mark Baker. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for One Workplace. We're headquartered in Santa Clara, but came up here a little over a year ago and excited to be here. I think we're actually in my favorite space, it's the Oasis. It's just a really comfortable, warm room. It's got Frank's technology built into it, and it's probably the best example I've seen to create that true kind of hybrid, braiding the digital and physical together to create that kind of distributed collaboration experience that I think we're all going to be trying to figure out how to navigate going forward.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Frank Buckholz. I'm on the Surface commercial marketing team as part of Microsoft. And I'd have to say my favorite space was probably the flex space that I was in. I love that idea of going from a fixed space to a flexible space and being able to adjust that. Just yesterday, Microsoft announced that we are back to phase 5, which means that voluntarily employees can return back to work, as well as in September, we'll hopefully move to phase 6, which means that the entire corporation will come back to the workspace. But within Microsoft, we'll say that up to 50% of the time you can work from home. So being able to choose workspaces that are flexible or for hoteling and other options is something that we know will be very interested in as we start to look at this hybrid workspace. Hybrid isn't remote work. It's truly about being able to work in the areas and the spaces where you need to in order to be most productive.
Right. So I have a couple questions just around kind of first steps that people can take as they're starting to plan their back to office, or if they're back in office now, or in a hybrid environment. I'd love your thoughts on what recommendations you have for smaller incremental changes that could be done, more immediately for people, especially kind of on a lower budget if they can't redo the entire office space. So, do you have any tips and tricks around that?
Well, I'll start, and I know Steelcase is doing a lot of research on this. What we're seeing a lot of customers doing is are small changes, but still very visible ones, so that the employees really feel like they're coming back to someplace that's different. But we're really, frankly, not seeing a lot of customers doing that big change because most of them are still trying to understand, as people do come back, what work is going to return to the office and what work is going to stay potentially at home. And so we're seeing, I would call, more minor, almost like nips and tucks to spaces to certainly start to create some of these spaces that will support more collaboration that is most likely going to be happening in the office. And then the other big area that I know Steelcase's research has shown is a lot of pilots, and maybe I can let Rachel talk a little about that.
Yeah, exactly. So setting a direction or kind of a point of view of what you hope, hybrid work, right? And learning as people start to come back, what behaviors, what patterns emerge that need to be in the office. And so some of those spaces, collaboration spaces, we know are going to be in higher demand, social spaces. So those are the little investments we're seeing be a priority area or environment, but gathering that feedback from your employees and letting them know this is a journey. We're not going to snap and think we have all the answers. No one's ever come out of a pandemic with a new workplace strategy before. So being there as a partner with your employees in that journey, piloting, measuring, testing your ideas has really helped customers start to move the ball forward without trying to get it all right day one.
I think change management around that is almost more important than the physical changes you're going to make. You think about it, back in March, we all got, kind of thrown into the deep end of the pool of working from home, and I think all companies pivoted and navigated their way through it. But now, as we are emerging, Microsoft and others are starting this kind of encouraging people coming back, and then I think September seems to be kind of the big launch for a lot of the customers we're working with, and use that time now to start doing the change management things you need to do to communicate, to survey your employees, really get their input, and then be prepared to probably pivot the same way we had to pivot when we went into the pandemic, because I think it's going to be very hard to predict what that future state's really going to be, and it has to fit with what the culture is and obviously the business for each of your companies.
Right. I would add that what we've seen in our own studies within Microsoft is we've seen employees need for movement, and they want to be able to say, I think 46% of employees, not just within Microsoft, but a large survey we did for work-life balance, essentially came in and said that 46% of those people thought they would leave the area that they were in and move to another location because of flexibility. And that means that in order to retain top talent, you have to start considering how are you going to adjust to that. But when it comes back to investments that you would make, how do you make sure that the employees that are remote or come in from time to time are just as engaged and feel like they're part of the community as they are whether they're in person or remote? And it used to be that if everybody was in person and you had that one camera in the room that gave the wide view of the office table, then they would just have to deal with it essentially. But how do we start to think about how do we make sure that everybody can still see my face and my gestures and have ability to look straight into a camera individually as well as a larger scale piece? And so when we start to think about technology in those different spaces, we have to consider how are people that are remote just as much in the front row of the meeting as the people that are physically in the space itself.
Yeah, lots of things to start to to think through from all of those aspects. You know, in my role, I get to talk to lots of small businesses. And one thing that I've started to hear is, you know, with the budget conscious mind, as people are coming back to actually have, you know, a team have a small budget to say, you know, here's $1,000 to create a, you know, how are you going to work collaboratively and to be able to take part in that. And, you know, designing their collaboration space or repurposing a cubicle or two, but participating in that process as well. So that was something I heard from a couple companies. I was like, that's a good idea. I like that, to get people engaged and participating in that process.
Yeah, I think you want to have your employees feel like they have some input and in some cases even control of the choices of where and how they're going to work, and not feel like it's all being dictated to them.
And as you mentioned, change management, that's a big piece of it. You can build the space or you can have more technology in there, but developing the protocols and the behaviors that support that inclusivity with hybrid work, or the use of the space in a way that promotes the right behaviors for the team dynamic is really important. So as part of change management, you have to think about not just what's the policy we're rolling out on hybrid work, but what are the protocols that the team needs to operate with? What are the behaviors or rituals we want to promote? And how do we best support that with tools, technology, space?
So let's talk a little bit about technology. You know, as you were mentioning, you know, having people that are remote, maybe two cities, right, that you're needing to collaborate on a regular basis. So you have people in the office and then maybe people in the office in another city. What are some technology solutions that you might point people to start looking at for those sorts of examples?
Sure. Well, of course, I'm a little biased on the Microsoft side. I'm on a Zoom call, but Teams is a big story for Microsoft these days. One of the biggest things that we're starting to drive towards is the ability to use whiteboarding that is consistent across all the devices that you have access to. So whether you're on an Android device or you're on an iOS device or you're on a Windows device. By the way, we have a small announcement tomorrow you might want to tune into. But along that line, we want to make sure that everybody is on an even playing field, whether they're on a Teams call or they're on a Microsoft whiteboard, but being able to bring that collaboration and being able to co-author and brainstorm, whether that happens before the meeting, during, or after, we want to be able to have those arcs of being able to bring those different pieces of technology in. And those are very light lifts as far as investments, but it kind of drives towards the participation idea that even if the person isn't in the room with you, through cloud-based collaboration, they can feel like they're participating at the same level.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're hearing a lot is this notion of equity. And, there's obviously the social side of equity that so a lot of us have dealt with, but there's also just the physical presence equity that, as Frank said, pre-pandemic, we had maybe a couple of people that might have been remote, but they were almost like sitting up in the corner watching something and weren't really active participants in the meeting. And I think having now been through well over a year where all of us are outside the room, I think there's an increased sensitivity and awareness that we have to try and create both the tools and the protocols and the processes so that the people that are outside the room and the people inside the room all feel like they're part of the same meeting.
We walked in their shoes.
Yeah, all of us.
And sat in their seat.
Yes. That's a hard one. If you think of a meeting that you have 5 remote people and then people in a room, how do you, what type of tools are available so that you can see those facial expressions? We have tools like Teams, but how do you start to sort through what cameras do you even need? And, how do you do that? What are some of the best practices that you're starting to see in that?
I think for us, it's if we're looking at a team side or even Zoom, being able to use certified equipment that provides the level of quality as well as throughput that you would expect. I mean, when we look at a device like a Surface Laptop 4 I'm holding here, has built-in webcam within it and has the ability to provide that. We look at these things that are what we consider team certified. So whether they're team certified from other vendors like Logitech or Yealink or Poly, but being able to bring a lower cost camera that provides a high degree of throughput and that everybody turns their camera on, even if you're in a room with somebody, being able to have a panel of faces that you can look at and see expression is super important. And therefore having the quality of more certified based equipment that can be able to have plug and play into what you have, whether those are webcams or speakerphones, we're able to provide that. But I still think even in that space where you have a broad number of people in a meeting room, I think it'll be important that everybody still has their camera on. So you're able to feel like you're just as present with the people that are remote as the people that are sitting across the table from you.
Mm-hmm. So, a world where you have laptops in meetings that are being used for both video and, maybe notes or those sorts of things beyond just the presenter. Yeah.
And that protocol piece is important to say, okay, we all need to have our camera on, and that's part of that behavior change, as well as making sure the employees in the room or outside of the room are very comfortable with the technology in both settings. So if it's a barrier for them to get it up and running or to figure out the protocols and how they get that equitable experience, then it's not going to support what you're trying to drive for your employees. So making sure you give them the proper support, training, encouragement, select the products that you can help them at the best with will help that adoption rate.
I also think we haven't really seen what the future tools are going to be.
Right.
I think there's, we've all been living on Zoom or Teams, and they've been good, what I would characterize as communication devices, but they're really not great generative or collaborative tools. And we've been exposed to some emerging both software and hardware technologies that I think are still to come. I don't think we've really seen them yet. I'm sure Microsoft is a part of that, but there's a whole ecosystem, I think, of companies that are probably going to emerge out of this with a new set of tools that we aren't used to. That could incorporate things like VR and AR, as well as some of the more traditional technologies that we're used to.
Yeah, we had a big, there was a conversation more between some of our chiefs of marketing, and even being able to drive the story of digital sales and digital marketing is an important piece. And how do you build immersive experiences that allow a customer to experience something without even having to touch it? And so as we go back to those types of VR or even just three-dimensional objects, or being able to use holographic pieces or other technologies is interesting as to we continue to move forward. I agree. The future and how we will look at this modern workplace will very much be bound by how we come out of this pandemic and start to adopt technology.
What are some ways that companies could translate kind of cubicle spaces or cubicle style spaces into some of more of these collaborative or spaces that reflect some of the characteristics you've been talking about?
Yeah, well, I think cubicles will still need there, or individual spaces will still be needed, but as you shift that, thinking about how you make them open and inviting spaces. So depending on what you have today, there could be some ways to adjust what you have, or simply remove some of them, and that's where you put in that high performing ancillary spaces, social hubs, or collaborative environments that help people connect to the belonging of the company, the shared purpose, be seen, connect with colleagues, and maintain that network when they are in the space. So we're going to see less of those individual spaces, and the idea of shifting them to collaboration or to social is a really big driver.
Yeah, I think you're also seeing, to the extent that you had more of a one-for-one model coming into the pandemic, where everyone had kind of their own space. I think that's largely going away because, as Rachel said, you need to open up some of that space for more of those collaborative spaces. And so you're seeing a lot more companies talking about whether it's agile or flex or whatever the brand is on essentially more of a flexible individual space. Again, technology from a reservation standpoint can help ensure that you still have the spaces that you need. They'll still need to be cleaned, as need be as they're being rotated from person to person. But it's really about unless you have the flexibility or ability to expand your footprint, which very few companies do, it's really taking and rethinking and repurposing some of the floor plate that you have to these more collaborative, high-performing ancillary spaces.
Yeah. I think one thing we've seen on the Microsoft side too is that we've had a lot of customers come in. I know we mentioned REI from a design standpoint. So REI being an outdoor company centered here in Seattle, They actually have decided that their remote employees, except for maybe all their corporate employees, not their retail employees, but can now work from home. So what they're doing is essentially setting up what are called satellite centers so that you can come into the workspace for collaboration and communication and world-class communication capabilities, but you'll work from home for more of your concentration types of productivity work. And so being able to kind of allow that hybrid work where, working together in a world-class environment, but working from home to get your productivity pieces done or your creative pieces done is something that I think we've seen and we'll actually continue to see some kinds of customers continue to invest in based on their work style and what it is that they actually do.
Yeah, I've been following kind of their model, and it's very interesting to kind of use those hubs and those sorts of things. I know at the chamber offices, there's actually a pretty large event center sponsored by Microsoft that has several, big spaces, small spaces and such that, I anticipate members are going to kind of come back and start using in more of that hub type ways as they might have smaller offices or lots of folks that are working remotely and then coming together for that, team building or, a meeting or a launch or some of the in-person whiteboarding that you can do. So, well, thank you guys so much. I just loved, we've never done a webinar where we got to get a tour like this. It was so wonderful. And thank you all so much for all of the work that you have done in creating this amazing space. I now just want to work in your offices all the time or work in that lab or take a nap in the lab, cuddle up, read a book. I'll come in on the weekends and make sure that, it's all safe for everyone. So
You get views from here too.
yes, I know I can see some of the light shining in as well as we're in a nice sunny patch here in the Seattle area. Well, thank you all again for your time today, and a reminder for everyone watching and listening that this was recorded, so you can refer back and take a look at these awesome spaces later. And that will be in your post-event email as well as on the Seattle Metro Chamber of Commerce website. Thank you and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Sure.